Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Sacramento Zoo and our Wednesday Facebook Live from the Interpretive Center. Now, first off, we have got some really big news. But before we tell you the really big news, let's thank Jiffy Lube of Greater Sacramento for supporting the Sacramento Zoo. They've been great supporters of the zoo, especially for the last few months with our Facebook Live segments. But now to the really big news, if you haven't heard, and I'm sure you probably have, we are reopening. Sacramento Zoo is reopening on a Monday, June 15th. Now, it's going to be your next visit to the zoo is going to be a little different than the past, so we'd strongly encourage you to go to saczoo.org, and hopefully you'll be able to learn a little more how we're going to be doing ticketing and all the other good stuff like that. You know, we're going to have a few things different you're going to see here at the zoo. Now, one thing, all of our staff will be wearing a mask. I'm not wearing a mask at the moment because I'm socially distanced from our videographer Kate right now, but we are, all of our staff will be wearing a mask. We hope you'll wear a mask. It's not just for, people protection, but it's much protection for our animals too. So again, go to saczoo.org, and there's a whole page dedicated to our reopening, and we're really excited about it. We're really excited to see you back at the zoo, and what more can we say? But the subject of our morning here are the fulvous whistling duck. Now, in my hand I have Hermes, or actually Poseidon and Hermes. Now, these ducks are actually native to a good part of the Americas. They're found in the southern U.S., down through Mexico, all the way down to South America. They've even been found as far north as Oregon and Washington. And they're really fun ducks. Now, I've got a riddle for you, a question. Maybe you can answer it as we go on with our presentation. What do you call a duck that doesn't quack? Think about it for a moment. Hopefully you have a wonderful answer for us. But you've already gotten a hint as to what the answer is. But in the meantime, let's talk about Hermes Poseidon here. Now, they're about 7 years old. In fact, Hermes celebrated her birthday last week, and Poseidon here was actually hatched out. That's not your best side there, Poseidon. Was hatched last month in May, or actually 7 years ago in May. Now, these ducks were hatched right here at the Sacramento Zoo. Now, as you know, we actually have two lakes here at the zoo. We have what we call our upper lake and our lower lake. Well, the fulvous whistling ducks we had living in the lower lake. And we had a great wildlife collection. We had our fulvous whistling ducks. We had some Orinoco geese, our two crested streamers. They lived in that lake, and they had for a number of years. And of course, when we decided, let's recreate this habitat for alligators, well, the other fulvous whistling ducks went to other zoos. The crested screamers came up to our upper lake. So what happened about 7 years ago was that we decided we'd like to have some ducks as animal ambassadors, and that's where Poseidon and Hermes came in. So what happened was, when the mama duck laid eggs out on our lower lake, those eggs were collected and incubated by our bird staff. And so in about a month we had baby ducks. Oh, and here's your little hint to my question I posed earlier. Anyway, we had some baby ducklings. They were raised by our bird team, and then we took over their care, because when you're working with an animal like this, we'd like to have them used to being around people, being handled by people, and being comfortable with people. So they were hand-reared, and they were what we called imprinted. So the first thing they saw when they hatched out of that egg was people, and they thought, well, people must be our critter. So after a lot of handling, they become very comfortable with us. Now, you might notice Poseidon here is very comfortable standing on my hand. And the reason is partially because of that imprinting process, partially because she's used to being with us, but also because these birds are sometimes known as tree ducks. In fact, in India, which is part of their habitat, in the wild, these birds will actually nest in tree hollows and in crooks of branches. They'll lay their eggs up there. And other than that, though, they'll actually nest in more typical areas like marshes, in vegetation. But they're also called tree ducks. That's why she is so comfortable standing on my hand right now. So this is where you might have noticed in our promotion for our segment this morning, you might have seen hashtag the hand ducks. Well, that was actually, again, part of our process of training these birds, is getting them comfortable standing on our hand and comfortable being with us. So when they were younger, we started working with them, getting them comfortable. They don't have any problems, being off the ground. You'll see Hermes here is very comfortable sitting on that tree stump, and Poseidon here is very comfortable standing on my hand. So again, it's part of the training process. Part of the fact, we've got a great relationship with them, and they have a great relationship with us, and they're comfortable being with us. So again, that's why we have called them the hand ducks. Now, as far as the ducks in the wild, they'll typically inhabit marshes. They'll actually inhabit a lot of rice fields. Previously, they weren't necessarily found here in the U.S., but with agriculture and growing rice fields, these birds actually came up and came a little further north, and you'll find a large population that during the summertime will hang out in those fields and eat things like grains, rice, things like that. They also eat bugs in the water that we call a dabbler. They will actually be on the surface and they'll pick up insects, maybe grains off the surface, but periodically they'll go head first with their little duck fanny sticking straight up out of the water, and they'll be kind of reaching down to the bottom to pick up those seeds and grains that are on the bottom. Here at the Sacramento Zoo, we feed them a very specialized diet. It's actually made for waterfowl. It's made by a company called Missouri, which makes pretty much every zoo diet you can imagine for a variety of animals, and that's their primary diet here. But we also like to give them things like worms and crickets and then little insects, things like that, to add to for enrichment. We found that they really love earthworms, so we'll have a little puzzle feeder for them, and they will, they'll kind of get the little worms out of that puzzle feeder. Crickets, they love chasing after crickets. And again, that's really part of their enrichment, something we like to provide for all of our animals here at the zoo, is some fun enrichment, which comes in the form of food for these guys. Now, as I was mentioning before, they're found in the Americas, but they're also found in Africa. They're also found in India, generally a lot of the tropical regions of our planet. So they really are a worldwide duck. They're found all over our planet, again, typically in the tropical regions. And now I'm going to go back to our little question I posed to you. I hope a few of you might have had a chance to answer. Well, when a duck doesn't quack, what do you call them? Again, you call them a whistling duck. Now, not only did we have fulvous whistling ducks here at the zoo, in the form of like Hermes, Poseidon now, we also have what are called white-faced whistling ducks. They now live in our upper lake, along with the pelican and the flamingos, so they get along great. Now, there's a difference between the two, though. Now, one thing, these are called fulvous whistling ducks because of that lovely kind of tan, brownish coloration in their feathers. And when you come to the zoo, you'll see we have our white-faced whistling ducks in that lake, and they're mostly kind of a brownish color with black and white, and their face is also very white, so hence the name white-faced whistling duck, and also fulvous whistling duck, mainly connected to their coloration. Now, there's another difference, though, between the two. Now, with our fulvous whistling ducks, they have kind of sort of a two-note whistle. If I can wet my lips here, that's kind of a two-note whistle like that. The white-faced whistling ducks are more like sort of a three-note whistle. And that's how you can tell the two apart. So when we hear the white-faced whistling ducks, it's a very distinct call, very different from the fulvous whistling ducks like Hermes and Poseidon. Now, again, we've had these birds for about 7 years now. They're very much an active part of our outreach program. When things are when we were going to schools, and hopefully we'll be going to schools in the future again. These birds actually like to go out in preschool programs. They're very used to traveling with us, and again, that's all part of the training process, all part of the relationship process, getting comfortable being around us, and going out to different schools, places like that, particularly preschools. They were really fun. They really were a really fun addition to that. They like getting scratched every now and then on their neck. I'll scratch you a little bit on your neck. They're a little bit Poseidon. There you go. So, again, they're really, really fun ducks, to work with. Now, I was talking about their feeding a moment ago. You might have noticed here with Poseidon, I don't know if you can see it really, it's a little hard to see, but you'll notice she has kind of a comb-like structure in her beak. That is how they sort of filter feed. Now, you've seen whales have baleen. Well, these birds actually have that little comb-like structure, which helps them filter out the food as they kind of dig through the mud and sediment. They can get those little insects, seeds, things like that. Also, too, now, as far as ducks go, they sort of look like a small goose. In fact, they're even more closely related to geese than they are ducks. Another thing, too, now, you'll see mallards here at the zoo. Those are wild. With a lot of duck species, they have a lot of what we call they're very different in appearance, sexual dimorphism. The males and females look very different. With fulvous whistling ducks, they basically look the same, males and females. They both have the same coloration, roughly the same size, and again, their names are Poseidon and Hermes, which are male god names. They are female ducks. When they were younger, we didn't know what they were, and one way we've actually found out what gender they are is through a blood test, a DNA blood test. Our vets took a blood sample, and through analysis they determined these are females. We named them already. they don't care. There's still really cool names. You'll find a lot of different animals here at the zoo. We use what we're called naming conventions. Basically, we'll come up with a theme for the names. We kind of like the Greek god theme, so that's why how these birds got their names. Some of our lemurs, like our black and white ruffed lemurs, they've gotten names named after salads and all kinds of different things. So it's just a fun way the keepers can come up with cool names for the animals, and sometimes you like to follow a theme. That's how they got the names Hermes and Poseidon, by the way. So again, really cool. Now, as I mentioned before, we had a colony or a flock of these birds living in our lower lake, along with our crested streamers, Joan and Jet. Well, a couple of years ago, actually a few years ago, they started Joan and Jet decided to lay eggs. And this is a really, really fun story about these ducks. Well, not these particular ducks, but the fulvous whistling ducks and our crested streamers. Joan and Jet built a really lovely stick nest to lay their eggs, and Joan laid some eggs. Actually a couple of years, a couple of seasons, one after the other. She laid her eggs, and like any good mother would do, or mother bird would do, she was sitting in the nest. But the kind of cool thing was, we had one, maybe two fulvous whistling ducks that decided they actually wanted to help. What they did was they actually started sitting on the eggs just like Joan and Jet were. And they were taking turns sitting on the nest along with the crested streamers. Now, crested streamers, as you've probably seen here at the zoo, this big gray, almost turkey-looking waterfowl species with a little crest on the top of their head. Well, they're much larger, but our little fulvous whistling ducks were sitting on those eggs, which are pretty good size. I mean, they're about this big compared to our friend the ducks here. So it was really kind of a fun comparison. Look at the two. Look at the size of the egg, look at the size of the duck, and they actually helped incubate those crested streamer eggs. So it was actually kind of fun watching them, because you'd see them. The fulvous whistling duck was sitting on the eggs. Then one of the streamers would come over and wanting to incubate the eggs, would lay right on top of the duck, while the duck was underneath the streamer on top of the eggs, incubated. Actually, the second clutch that were laid a couple of years ago, we successfully had one of the streamers hatch. He's since gone off to another zoo. His name is Gobi. But yeah, and so, they hatched out successfully, and they did fantastically well. So we had kind of an interesting interspecies relationship between the fulvous whistling ducks and our crested streamers. In fact, we also had Orinoco geese on that lower lake, along with the other waterfowl. Well, geese being geese, they were kind of ornery sometimes. A little. They like to disturb things, kind of stir things up a little bit. And after that little baby crested streamers hatched out, the Orinoco geese came over and said, "Wow, what's that? Let's go check this out." Well, I was watching that day, and that fulvous duck that was helping raise, or to incubate those eggs, and actually sit on that baby streamer, got up and charged and flew at the Orinoco geese, chasing them off. So again, that was just a cute story, and just a really cool thing about wildlife out in the wild. A lot of times they'll kind of help raise other animals, and that was a really cool thing that happened with our ducks here. Now, if you have any questions about our fulvous whistling ducks, Kate, do we have any questions yet?
Well, so a little thing for the public. Right now, it appears that Facebook Live is having a bit of an issue and we aren't getting any questions in, but I'm going to go ahead and say you can submit your questions and we can go back in and we will try to answer them as we can after our Facebook Live is done for this session. So we'll type in our answers when we can with your questions. Again, really sorry that they don't appear to be working. Hopefully, I see that people are viewing and that the stream is on, but we'll get to your questions once this is complete.
Oh, and you heard that two-note whistle? Hermes side will talk back towards one another. And actually, again, part of our relationship with these birds is being able to whistle back and forth to them. Again, it's all that bonding process that comes through. A lot of times we'll let these birds kind of wander free on our reptile house lawn. They just will hang out with us, they'll follow us around. So again, it's really an important thing, like when you have animals like this, animal ambassadors that you're working with in a lot of different situations, you'd like them comfortable around you. And so again, we just spend a lot of time with them, like all of our animal ambassadors. So, Kate, can you think of any questions people might have?
Absolutely. So I was wondering how these ducks manage to stay nice and warm even when the water might be cool.
Well, that's the one thing. Now, ducks being ducks, they... okay, you okay there, Poseidon? Good girl. See how well balanced she is?
She's a wrist duck now.
Yeah, a wrist duck now. In fact, we can even do double hand. No, we won't do double hand duck. Right? Anyway, so their feathers are highly water resistant. They actually have oil. They have a gland on their back end, which they will use to coat their feathers, which is almost like wearing a rain jacket. It's like an oiled feathers, which help keep them dry, also helps them keep warm. So feathers on a bird, you know, they're really handy because it keeps them warm, dry. It also helps them in some cases almost float. In some cases, basically, again, just to hold that warmth in as they sit in the water. So and again, these birds do come from a wide range of habitats in the wild. So they're really used to a really wide range of environments and temperatures.
Now, I know we've seen some different birds here as well. Can we talk about how their feet might be different from maybe the of a raptor?
Good thing. Now, as Kate mentioned, you know, their feet are very different. These are typical duck feet, and you can see they're webbed. That's actually important for them to be able to paddle around in the water, whereas, like, say, a raptor, a bird of prey, would have very different, like a hawk or an eagle or an owl would use their feet to catch their prey with. Well, these guys basically use their feet to paddle. So they have little built-in paddles there, so they can make their way through the water. Also helps them maneuver and dive into the water, kind of just like when you go swimming and put some flippers on. You can actually kind of push your way through the water. Exact same thing. Again, their beak, again, really specifically suited to actually filtering out through the pond sediment and getting those nutrients, the things like the algae and plants and seeds, insects, things like that. There's actually a kind of an interesting meme right now, and once I mention it, you'll probably never unsee it. If you look closely at a duck's beak, it kind of looks like a dog's face. See it now? Yeah, so anyway, that's something that I'm sure you'll never be able to unsee. Now, every time you see a duck, you'll see that. Now, so again, you know, really, really fun birds to work with. They're just really, they've got great personalities. You know, all animals have very interesting personalities, all very much individuals. These birds, you know, again, they're both females. They do lay eggs periodically, seasonally. Of course, you know, these being both female ducks, you know, we won't have any ducklings hatched out here, but they still do that. It's still something part of their physiology and still part of their behavior. You know, that time of the year, they may be a little bit more territorial. Sometimes, you know, of course, we always respect that. You know, if they don't want to come out with us, no problem. You know, we just kind of let them be on their own. But, you know, again, generally they're just really fun, and they really have a good time coming out. And I think, you know, it's again, speaks for the relationship we've built with these animals. You know, they enjoy following us around, and you know, it's something, you know, we couldn't ask for more with these ducks.
Mm-hmm. Now, what does she do when she's kind of putting her beak into her feathers?
Basically, okay, so it's preening, cleaning. Basically, you know, they want to keep their feathers clean. Now, especially a bird that spends a lot of time in the water doesn't want a lot of dirt and other types of debris in their feathers. They want to make sure their feathers are clean. It's called preening. It's basically just, again, and also, you know, they've got that little oil gland on their rump area, and there's, you know, spreading the oil, treating their feathers to make sure they're nice and waterproof, and that way, just so like that little old saying goes, water off a duck's back. Well, that's what they use to keep that water.
Literally, water will go off a duck's
exactly.
back.
It literally does. It's really part of a duck's, you know, physiology.
Mm-hmm. Now, do these ducks fly a lot?
Yeah, actually they do. Now, these ducks in the wild, out in nature, they do migrate. A lot of times they will fly from the southern portions of the U.S. down into Mexico, the coastal regions, down to South America, because they are so wide-ranging. It does mean that they do you know, they're definitely migrating birds, and you know, they don't follow a really nice, you'll see sometimes like waterfowl, like geese, you know, that nice V pattern, things like that. They're a little more jumbled around in the sky. You know, they don't really have that tight knit flight pattern, but they're very vocal. They, you know, they're you know, whistling to one another, trying to keep contact with one another, but they do look a little different in flight. So again, you know, they're just a little different behavior than a lot of other ducks you might see.
Now, where do these ducks typically nest when they're building those nests?
Good question. So, you know, a lot of times they'll build nests in swampy areas, in plants, you know, in water, like wetlands, places like that. In India, again, they are known as tree ducks because they are often found in tree hollows. Now, there are, you know, a few different species of duck that do lay their eggs up in the trees, and of course, you know, mama duck lays her eggs, incubates the eggs. When those ducklings hatch, they've got to be able to get down to the ground. Well, of course, mom could fly down, no trouble at all, but you know, she has to find a place to go, you know, find safety out in the water. And those little baby ducklings are sitting up in the tree, like could be 20 feet off the ground. How are they going to get down to the ground? Well, very simple. Those ducklings are tiny, they're soft, they're covered with down. The ground's generally pretty soft with things like, you know, ground cover and foliage. Little baby ducklings, they just kind of step off the edge, flop down to the ground, bounce, and follow mom to a safe location out in the water. So you'll probably see nature documentaries periodically. Little baby ducks coming out and falling onto the ground. Doesn't hurt them at all. Even here at the zoo, sometimes we have the wild mallards will lay eggs in kind of unusual spots off the ground, and periodically we'll have a little shower of mallard ducklings. But they pop right back up, follow mom out to the lake, and everything's fine.
All right, I think we're about ready to be done. I just want to reiterate that while we couldn't see our questions today during the live, we will go back through and try to answer those as best as we can afterwards. But I'm going to let Mike say any closing statements before we sign off today.
Well, once again, we do want to thank Jiffy Lube of Greater Sacramento. Done a fantastic job of supporting the zoo and continuing to support the zoo. Thank you for all of your support, because it's been really important to us throughout this time. The last few months have been, a little trying for all of us, but it's made us feel so much more secure and happy knowing we still have supporters out there. And again, we will be opening on Monday, this coming Monday. So again, go to saczoo.org and check it out, find out exactly how you'll be able to come visit us again. We are so looking forward to it. Thank you once again, and have a great day. And again, stay safe, everyone.